The morning started like any other in Geneva. Ambassador Keiko Chen sipped her coffee while reviewing reports from the Mars colonies. Humanity had finally reached the stars and the future looked bright. Then the sky went dark. Massive ships appeared above every major city on Earth. They were enormous, each one larger than Manhattan, blocking out the sun with their metallic hulls. No warning, no detection. They simply materialized as if space itself had torn open to release them. The communications came minutes later. Every screen, every device, every speaker on Earth crackled to life simultaneously. The voice that spoke was translated into every human language at once, cold and emotionless. Attention, species designated human. You are now under the jurisdiction of the Galactic Council. Your unregulated emergence into faster-than-light travel has been noted. Compliance with emergence laws is mandatory. Keiko dropped her coffee cup. Around the world, billions of people stopped and stared at screens showing the same image. A massive council chamber filled with dozens of alien species, all watching Earth like scientists observing bacteria in a petri dish. The speaker continued. It called itself the Supreme Arbiter, leader of 47 species that had maintained galactic order for 10,000 years. The Arbiter explained that humanity's development of FTL technology triggered ancient laws. These laws stated that all emerging species must submit to council authority. They must prove themselves worthy through centuries of observation and obedience. The terms were simple. Earth had 30 days to comply. All military forces must disarm. All weapons technology must be surrendered. Genetic samples from every human must be catalogued. Council governors would oversee Earth's integration into their system. Humanity would be classified as a Tier 5 species, subject to all restrictions and regulations that came with that designation. You will be protected, the Arbiter said. You will be guided. You will learn your place in the galactic order. Resistance is illogical. 47 species stand united in this requirement. You stand alone, the transmission ended. The ships remained, hovering in silence above humanity's greatest cities. Within hours, every government on Earth convened emergency sessions. Keiko found herself in a packed room with world leaders, generals, and scientists. Everyone talked at once. Some argued for immediate surrender. Others demanded they fight. Most simply looked terrified. We have to be smart about this, Keiko said, her voice cutting through the chaos. They came here with overwhelming force because they expect us to submit. That's what other species do. But we need to understand what we're dealing with before we make any decisions. General James Morrison, head of Earth's combined military forces, shook his head. Ambassador Chen, we've run every simulation. Their ships have energy shields that our weapons can't penetrate. Their smallest fighters are more advanced than our best battleships. If we fight, we lose. It's that simple. Then we don't fight yet, Keiko replied. We talk, we learn. We buy time. Dr. Marcus Webb, a physicist who had helped develop Earth's FTL drive, leaned forward. I agree with the ambassador, but there's something wrong with this entire situation. If they've been watching the galaxy for 10,000 years, why didn't they contact us before we developed FTL? Why wait until we can spread to other systems? Because now we're a threat, said Colonel Sarah Okonkwo, one of Earth's top tactical officers. Before FTL, we were contained. One planet, easy to destroy if necessary. Now we have colonies on Mars and Europa. We can spread. That makes us dangerous to their control. The debates continued for days. Keiko led diplomatic efforts to communicate with the Council, requesting clarification, asking for negotiations, trying to understand the full scope of what submission meant. The Council responded with bureaucratic documents that detailed everything. Humans would be restricted to their home system for a minimum of 500 years. All scientific research would require Council approval. Human population would be regulated. Cultural practices would be reviewed and potentially modified to align with Council standards. Earth would have no vote, no voice, no authority in galactic affairs. They would be slaves in everything but name. Keiko read through thousands of pages of regulations. She found records of other species that had joined the Council. Every single one had submitted within their 30-day window. Those that hesitated received corrective demonstrations. Those that refused outright were listed as extinct. On day 15, Keiko presented her findings to the Emergency World Council. Her hands shook slightly as she displayed the data. This isn't a partnership, she said. This isn't even colonization. This is domestication. They want to break us down and rebuild us into something compliant, something that will never challenge their authority. Then what choice do we have? Asked the Premier of China. You've seen the records. Species that resist are destroyed, every single one. Maybe that's because no species has ever really resisted, Sarah Okonkwo said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood, her military uniform crisp despite the days of endless meetings. I've been studying their tactics. Every enforcement action in their records follows the same pattern. They show up with overwhelming force. They make demands. Species submit immediately, or they're destroyed in a single crushing blow. It's always been fast. Your point? Morrison asked. My point is that they've never fought a real war. They've never faced prolonged resistance. They enforce through shock and awe, not through sustained military campaign. They've never needed to. Marcus Webb's eyes widened, because it's always worked. For 10,000 years, every species they've encountered has been either too primitive to resist or too intimidated to try. Exactly, Sarah continued. But what if we don't surrender and we don't get destroyed in one blow? What if we drag this out? Make it costly? Make them bleed? The room erupted in argument again. The cost would be enormous. Millions would die. Earth's cities would burn. But Keiko saw something in Sarah's eyes, something in Marcus's expression. A spark of hope, dangerous and desperate. On day 28, Earth's answer was delivered. Keiko stood before the cameras representing all of humanity and spoke directly to the Galactic Council. We have reviewed your terms, she said, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her. We understand the consequences of refusal, but humanity must respectfully decline your offer of protection. We will not surrender our sovereignty. We will not submit to your authority. We are willing to negotiate as equals, but we will not kneel. The response came within minutes. The Supreme Arbiter's voice carried disappointment, like a parent scolding a stubborn child. Your defiance is noted. Corrective measures will now be implemented. This is unfortunate but necessary. You will learn the price of refusing galactic order. The ships above Earth's cities began to glow. Sarah Okonkwo, watching from a military command center, grabbed her communications device. All forces, this is it. Execute defensive protocols now. The first bombardment hit Beijing. Precision strikes from orbit obliterated every military installation in a 50-mile radius. Then Moscow. Then Washington. Then every major military facility on the planet. The attacks were surgical, devastating, meant to break humanity's will without destroying the planet's infrastructure. In 3 hours, Earth's conventional military was reduced to scattered remnants. 40 million people died. The Council's demonstration was complete. Keiko watched the destruction from an underground bunker. Tears streamed down her face, but her expression remained hard. Sarah stood beside her, bloodied from a partial building collapse, but alive. Marcus worked frantically at a computer terminal, his fingers flying across the keys. They think it's over, Sarah said quietly. They think we'll surrender now. Will we? Someone asked. Keiko wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders. No. Now we show them what humans do when you back us into a corner. Now we fight. Outside, the Council ships waited for Earth's inevitable surrender. They had no idea what they had just started. The bunker had become humanity's new capital. 300 feet below the Swiss Alps, world leaders coordinated the remnants of Earth's resistance. The death toll climbed past 50 million as secondary explosions and infrastructure collapse continued. The Council ships remained in orbit, waiting for the surrender that every other species had offered by now. It didn't come. Instead, Earth went dark. Cities evacuated underground. Satellites went silent. Military forces scattered into small mobile units. To the Council observers, it looked like humanity was collapsing into chaos. They didn't realize they were watching a coordinated retreat. Keiko Chen spent her days in diplomatic channels, buying time with procedural questions and requests for clarification. The Council, accustomed to bureaucratic processes, indulged her. They believed submission was inevitable. Every species broke eventually. Meanwhile, Marcus Webb worked around the clock in a laboratory carved from solid rock. His team of scientists had been developing experimental weapons before the Council arrived. Now those experiments had become humanity's only hope. The theory is sound, Marcus explained to a gathering of military commanders. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, his hands shaking from too much caffeine. The Council ships use quantum-locked energy shields. They're incredibly strong because they exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, but that's also their weakness. Sarah Okonkwo studied the equations displayed on the screen. She didn't understand the math, but she understood weapons. How do we exploit it? We disrupt the quantum lock. Force the shields to collapse into a single dimension. It'll create a cascade failure. Marcus pulled up a simulation. I call it a quantum disruption pulse. Problem is, we've never tested it at this scale. It could work perfectly, or it could tear a hole in space-time and kill everyone in the solar system. What are the odds? Sarah asked. Marcus hesitated. 60-40, favoring success. Those are terrible odds. They're better than 0, which is what we have otherwise. Sarah nodded slowly. Build it. I'll find you a target. On Mars, the situation was deteriorating. The colony held 3 million people, and they could see Earth's struggles from across the void. Some colonists argued for separate surrender. Why should Mars die for Earth's stubbornness? Council ships appeared in Mars orbit, offering amnesty to any colony that surrendered independently. Governor Thomas Reeves, leader of the Mars colony, faced the hardest decision of his life. His communications officer brought him a message from Earth. It was short from Keiko Chen herself. We know you have to make your own choice. Whatever you decide, we understand. But remember this. If they can make us kneel, they can make anyone kneel. Today it's Earth, tomorrow it's Mars, eventually it's everyone. Some lines have to be held, no matter the cost. Reeves stared at the message for a long time. Then he drafted his response to the Council ships in Mars orbit. Go to hell. The Council bombardment began immediately. Smaller than Earth's demonstration, but devastating nonetheless. The Mars colony went underground too, into the mining tunnels that crisscrossed the red planet. 200,000 died in the initial strikes. The survivors prepared to fight. Back on Earth, Sarah Okonkwo led the first counterattack. Her target was a Council landing party that had set down near the ruins of London. 50 alien soldiers, heavily armed and shielded, securing a base of operations. They expected terrified refugees or scattered resistance fighters. They got Sarah. Her team hit them at night using guerrilla tactics that the Council had never encountered. Explosives buried in rubble. Sniper fire from collapsed buildings. Drones modified into flying bombs. The alien shields protected them from direct fire, but Sarah didn't fight directly. She fought dirty. The battle lasted 6 hours. 43 Council soldiers died. Sarah lost 18 of her 20-person team, but she captured 7 aliens alive and retrieved their weapons and equipment. More importantly, she learned something crucial. The Council soldiers were scared. They had never faced determined resistance before. Their tactics were designed for intimidation, not actual combat. They moved in rigid formations, relied too heavily on their shields, assumed their technological superiority was absolute. They weren't warriors. They were police enforcers who had never met anyone willing to fight back. Sarah dragged herself back to the bunker, wounded but alive. She dropped the captured equipment on Keiko's desk. They're not unbeatable. They're just used to being unchallenged. Marcus Webb examined the captured weapons with fascination. This technology. It's centuries ahead of ours, but it's not designed for war. It's designed for control. There's a difference. Over the next 2 weeks, humanity launched dozens of small attacks. Nothing that could win, but everything that could teach. They learned how Council shields operated, how their weapons worked, how their soldiers thought, and they learned that the Council was growing frustrated. The Supreme Arbiter sent another message. This time, the cold, emotionless voice carried a hint of anger. Your resistance is pointless and costly. You are destroying your own planet for nothing. Accept Council authority and the bombardment will cease. Continue this futility and we will be forced to escalate. We do not wish to exterminate humanity, but we will if necessary. Keiko responded with a question. How many species have you exterminated? Your records show at least 17 classified as extinct after refusing submission. What makes you different from the conquerors and tyrants of our own history? The Arbiter didn't answer directly. Instead, Council ships began targeting underground shelters. The message was clear. There was nowhere to hide. Marcus Webb worked faster. His team assembled the first quantum disruption device in a converted missile bunker. It was crude, barely functional, and potentially catastrophic, but it was ready. Sarah selected the target, a Council dreadnought in high orbit above what used to be New York. It was one of the smaller capital ships, but still massive enough to devastate a continent. More importantly, its destruction would send a message. The device was loaded onto a modified satellite launcher, one of the few that survived the initial bombardment. Marcus programmed the targeting sequence himself, his hands steady despite knowing what failure would mean. "This is it," he said quietly. "Either this works and we have a fighting chance, or it doesn't and we've accomplished nothing but our own extinction." Keiko stood beside him in the launch control room. "Sometimes the only choice is between dying on your feet or living on your knees." "I choose feet," the launcher fired. The device rocketed toward orbit, accelerating beyond what any human weapon had achieved before. Council defense systems tracked it immediately, but they didn't recognize the threat. It was just one small missile, barely worth noticing. The quantum disruption pulse activated 3 kilometers from the dreadnought. Space itself seemed to shimmer and twist. The Council ship's shields, which had weathered every human weapon without strain, suddenly collapsed. The ship's hull, no longer protected, was exposed to the vacuum of space and the stress of its own internal systems. The dreadnought tore itself apart from the inside out. Explosions blossomed across its surface as the atmosphere vented. Systems overloaded and structural integrity failed. In 30 seconds, a ship that had enforced Council will for centuries became expanding debris. Marcus stared at the monitors in disbelief. It worked. By God, it actually worked. Around the world, humans who had hidden underground emerged to see the light show in orbit. Pieces of the destroyed dreadnought burned as they fell through the atmosphere, like a meteor shower of Council arrogance. Sarah Okonkwo allowed herself a grim smile. "Now they know. We can hurt them." The response from the Council was swift and furious. For the first time in 10,000 years, a lesser species had drawn their blood. The Supreme Arbiter's next message contained no offers, no negotiations, no bureaucratic pleasantries. "The enforcement fleet has been dispatched to Earth. Your defiance ends now. You will surrender or you will be exterminated. There is no third option." Keiko read the message and felt ice in her stomach. The enforcement fleet was what the Council used when demonstrations failed. It was designed for one purpose: complete annihilation of rebellious species. She looked at Marcus and Sarah, these two people who had given humanity a fighting chance. "How long until they arrive?" 6 days, Sarah said, checking tactical reports. "And they're sending everything. 30 capital ships, hundreds of support vessels, enough firepower to burn the surface of Earth 3 times over." Marcus ran calculations on his terminal. "We can build more disruption devices. Maybe 20 in 6 days. That's not enough." "Then we don't just defend," Keiko said quietly. "We attack. If they want to exterminate us, we make them pay a price they can't forget." Around the table, plans began to form. Desperate plans, impossible plans, human plans. The enforcement fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 30 massive warships materialized at the edge of the solar system, each one capable of reducing a planet to molten slag. These weren't police vessels or intimidation platforms. These were weapons of extinction, and they had never failed to complete their mission. Fleet Commander Thrace, a veteran of 40 enforcement actions across 2 centuries, studied the tactical display. Earth appeared defenseless. No ships in orbit, no defensive platforms, just a scarred planet with scattered heat signatures underground. The humans had gone to ground like animals. "Standard bombardment pattern," Thrace ordered. "Commence in 1 hour. Total surface sterilization." What Thrace didn't know was that every underground shelter on Earth was now a weapons platform. Every remaining satellite was a bomb. Every ship, whether military or civilian, had been converted into a missile with a human pilot at the controls. Marcus Webb had produced 23 quantum disruption devices, and each one was positioned in a carefully calculated grid throughout the solar system. Sarah Okonkwo had taken command of all military operations. She stood in the command bunker, surrounded by screens showing positions of both human and Council forces. Her plan was simple in concept, impossible in execution. Hit them everywhere at once. Give them no time to adapt, no chance to respond with measured force. "All units," she said calmly into the communication system. "Execute Operation Desperate Fury." The solar system erupted. Human ships launched from hidden positions on Earth, Mars, Europa, and a dozen asteroid bases. Most were civilian vessels with military weapons bolted to their hulls. Their pilots knew they weren't coming back. They accelerated at speeds that would kill them in hours from radiation exposure, aiming directly at Council warships. The enforcement fleet responded with practiced efficiency, destroying the first wave of human ships with ease. But the second wave was already behind them, and the third, and the fourth. Hundreds of ships, each one piloted by someone who had volunteered for a one-way mission. Commander Thrace watched in confusion as human vessels slammed into his shields, doing no damage but creating chaos. What is this? What are they trying to accomplish? Then the quantum disruption devices activated. Space itself warped around 13 Council warships. Their shields collapsed simultaneously. The human suicide ships, which had positioned themselves perfectly, detonated their weapons against unprotected hulls. 5 Council vessels died in the first 30 seconds. Thrace felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: fear. All ships, evasive patterns. Identify and destroy the disruption devices. But the devices were small, mobile, and scattered across millions of kilometers. Council sensors weren't designed to find them. They were designed to track large ships and planetary installations. Meanwhile, Sarah's ground forces launched every weapon Earth had left. Missiles, railgun slugs, modified nuclear warheads, all fired from underground silos. The Council's orbital ships moved to intercept, and that's when the satellite struck. Dozens of them had been hiding in the debris field from the first destroyed dreadnought. Now they activated, ramming into Council vessels or detonating nuclear payloads at point-blank range. The battle became a nightmare of close-range chaos. Council ships couldn't use their planet-killer weapons without hitting each other. Human forces swarmed like angry insects, individually insignificant, but collectively devastating. Every Council ship that destroyed a human vessel found 3 more taking its place. On Mars, Governor Reeves led his own assault. The colony had converted mining equipment into weapons. They launched drones carrying quantum disruption devices toward the Council ships in Mars orbit. 2 warships died before they could respond effectively. Commander Thrace tried to restore order, but his tactical systems were overwhelmed. The humans weren't following any logical battle doctrine. They fought like they had nothing to lose, because they didn't. A civilization facing extinction fought with a desperation the Council had never encountered. "Pull back to defensive formation," Thrace ordered. "Let them exhaust themselves against our shields." But the quantum disruption devices made shields unreliable. Any ship could have its protection stripped away without warning. The enforcement fleet, designed for overwhelming offensive power, found itself trying to defend against attacks from every direction at once. In the command bunker, Keiko Chen wasn't watching the battle. She was engaged in a different kind of warfare. Through diplomatic channels, she was broadcasting everything to other Council species. Every ship humanity destroyed, every desperate sacrifice, every moment of this impossible resistance, and she was transmitting a message alongside the footage. "We are humanity. We are being exterminated for refusing to surrender our freedom. We know we cannot win, but we fight anyway because some things are worth dying for. How many of you joined the Council willingly? How many submitted because you feared this same fate? How long will you watch species after species be crushed before you ask if this is justice or tyranny?" The message reached hundreds of Council worlds. Most dismissed it as propaganda from a dying species. But on 3 worlds something stirred. The Rathali, a species that had joined the Council 500 years ago, watched humanity's battle with growing unease. The Rathali representative to the Council, an elderly female named Saris, remembered when her own people faced a similar choice. They had submitted immediately, and for 5 centuries had regretted their cowardice. Now she watched humans die by the millions rather than kneel, and she felt shame. Saris accessed restricted Council files, using her authority to dig into records most species never saw. What she found made her blood run cold. 17 species marked as extinct, 43 more listed as fully integrated, but with population numbers that had dropped by 90% in their first century under Council rule. Dozens of cultures erased, hundreds of worlds reduced to resource farms. The Council wasn't maintaining order. It was maintaining dominance. Back in the solar system, the battle raged for 3 days. Humanity threw everything they had at the enforcement fleet. Every ship, every weapon, every quantum disruption device. The casualties were staggering. 8 million humans died. 12 Council warships were destroyed. 6 more crippled. Commander Thrace had never seen anything like it. His forces were winning, but at a cost that should have been impossible. A Tier 5 species couldn't inflict this kind of damage. It violated every assumption about technological supremacy. Status report, he demanded. 60% combat effective, his tactical officer reported. But sir, we've received word that 3 council species have filed formal protests about this action. The Rathali, the Meknor, and the Vasilians. They're demanding negotiation instead of extermination. Thrace felt rage building. We don't negotiate with defiant species. That's not how this works. Sir, the protests are being heard by the full council assembly. This is unprecedented. On Earth, Sarah Okonkwo watched her forces dwindle. They had fought harder than anyone thought possible. But math was math. The council still had 18 functional warships. Humanity had exhausted almost every resource. In another day, maybe 2, Earth would be defenseless. Marcus Webb entered the command center, his face grim. I have one more option. It's not good. Tell me, Sarah said. I can create a chain reaction with the remaining quantum disruption devices. Instead of just collapsing shields, it'll destabilize local space. Create expanding zones where FTL travel becomes impossible. Maybe even where normal matter becomes unstable. It'll spread like a wave, affecting everything in the solar system and beyond. How far beyond? Could reach council space. Could make dozens of star systems uninhabitable. I can't control it precisely. Sarah stared at him. That's not a weapon. That's galactic suicide. It's a threat, Marcus corrected. If they know we can do this, that we're willing to render entire regions of space unusable rather than surrender, they might back down. Mutually assured destruction. It worked during our Cold War. That's insane. We're past sane, Colonel. We're at extinction or damnation. I'm giving you a third option. Make them too afraid to kill us. Sarah looked at Keiko, who had been listening to the exchange. The ambassador's face was pale but determined. Do it, Keiko said. Prepare the cascade. But don't activate it yet. I need to make one more broadcast. An hour later, every council ship, every council world, every species in the galactic network received the same message. Keiko Chen appeared on their screen, standing in the ruins of what used to be Geneva. Behind her, Earth cities burned. Around her, human soldiers stood defiant despite their wounds. Attention, Galactic Council, she began. You came to Earth demanding submission. We refused. You demonstrated your power by killing millions. We still refused. You sent your enforcement fleet to exterminate us. We have fought you to a standstill, at terrible cost to both our peoples. Now I want to show you something. The image switched to Marcus Webb's laboratory. The quantum cascade device glowed with barely contained energy. This is a quantum cascade initiator, Keiko continued. In 1 hour we will activate it. The resulting reaction will destabilize space throughout this region of the galaxy. Your ships in our system will die. Our planet will die. But the cascade won't stop there. The ceasefire held, but barely. Council ships remained in orbit around Earth and Mars. Weapons powered but not firing. Human forces stayed underground, fingers on triggers waiting for betrayal. The quantum cascade device hummed with potential destruction. A doomsday clock that nobody could afford to let reach zero. Keiko Chen found herself in an impossible position. She was negotiating for humanity's survival with a gun to the galaxy's head. The Council had sent negotiators, but they treated her with barely concealed hatred. To them, she was a barbarian who had threatened cosmic order itself. The lead negotiator was a creature called Vorn, from a species that had served the Council for 3,000 years. He looked like a collection of crystalline shards that somehow moved and spoke. His voice was like glass breaking. You must understand the position you have created, Vorn said, his tone dripping with disdain. You threaten not just yourselves, but innocent species throughout this region of space. This is terrorism on a galactic scale. No, Keiko replied calmly. This is self-defense. You came to our home and tried to enslave us. When we refused, you tried to kill us. Now you're upset that we found a way to make you hesitate. Tell me, Vorn, in your 3,000 years of council membership, how many times have you voted against enforcement actions? Vorn's crystalline body flickered. That's not relevant. It's completely relevant. The council maintains order through fear. You threaten extinction to anyone who defies you. Well, now we're threatening mutual extinction. Suddenly, negotiation doesn't seem so unreasonable, does it? The talks dragged on for days. The Supreme Arbiter refused to participate directly, seeing it as beneath his authority. But Keiko could sense cracks forming in the Council's unity. 3 species had openly protested the enforcement action. Others were watching nervously. wondering if humanity's defiance would inspire rebellions on their own worlds. Meanwhile, Sarah Okonkwo received intelligence that changed everything. One of the captured council soldiers had been convinced to share information. What he revealed was staggering. The Terminus fleet is coming, Sarah told the emergency council. It's their absolute last resort. Planet killers. Weapons that crack worlds open like eggs. If we don't reach an agreement soon, they'll send ships that can destroy Earth in hours, quantum cascade or not. How long do we have? Keiko asked. A week, maybe less. Marcus Webb had been monitoring the quantum cascade device constantly. If they send the Terminus fleet, we'll have to activate the cascade. There won't be a choice. It's designed to spread before it can be stopped, so even if they destroy Earth, the reaction continues. Then we all die, someone said quietly. Then we all die, Marcus confirmed. Humanity, the council fleet in our system, and everyone in the affected space. The cascade will keep spreading until it burns itself out. Could be 50 star systems. Could be 500. We don't know. Keiko felt the weight of billions of lives on her shoulders. If she gave the order to activate the cascade, she would be responsible for one of the greatest catastrophes in galactic history. If she surrendered to save those lives, humanity would be enslaved forever. She needed another option. That's when Saris of the Rathali requested a private meeting. They met in a neutral location, a damaged space station that had been evacuated during the fighting. Saris was small, barely reaching Keiko's shoulder with iridescent scales and large emotional eyes. She looked terrified just being there. I shouldn't be doing this, Saris said immediately. What I'm about to tell you could get my entire species classified as rebels. Then why tell me? Keiko asked. Because I'm tired of being a coward. My people submitted to the council 5 centuries ago. We thought it was the smart choice. The safe choice. Since then, we've watched 43 other species make the same decision. We've watched 17 species get exterminated for refusing, and we've never once stood up and said that this is wrong. Saris pulled out a data device and handed it to Keiko. This contains everything. Every enforcement action. Every extinction. Every species that was integrated and quietly died out over centuries of council control. The Supreme Arbiter has maintained power for 10,000 years by making submission seem like the only logical choice. But your species proved something important. Resistance is possible. Keiko examined the data. It was explosive. Evidence of genocide, cultural destruction, and systematic oppression that the council had hidden behind bureaucratic language. Why give this to me? Because you need leverage. The Terminus fleet is coming, and when it arrives, even your cascade weapon might not be enough to stop it. But this data, broadcast across the entire council network, would destroy the Arbiter's authority. Other species would see what we've seen. They would question. They would resist. You're asking me to start a galactic civil war. I'm asking you to finish what you started. You shattered the illusion that the council is invincible. Now shatter the illusion that it's legitimate. Keiko took the data and returned to Earth. She spent hours reviewing it with her advisors. The evidence was damning. The council wasn't a benevolent government maintaining order. It was an empire built on fear, maintained through violence, sustained by the silence of its victims. If we release this, we can't predict what happens, General Morrison warned. Some species might rebel. Others might crack down harder on their own people. We could be responsible for conflicts across the galaxy. We're already responsible for what happens next, Keiko replied. The cascade is set to activate. The Terminus fleet is coming. We're past the point of playing it safe. The question is, do we want our last act to be mutual destruction, or do we want to give others a chance to break their own chains? Sarah Okonkwo had been quiet throughout the discussion. Now she spoke up. Ambassador, there's another consideration. We can't stop the Terminus fleet with conventional weapons. Even with the cascade, they might be able to destroy Earth before the reaction spreads far enough to matter. But if other council species are in open revolt, the Terminus fleet might be recalled to deal with domestic threats. You want to use this data as a distraction, Keiko said. I want to use it as a weapon, the most powerful weapon we have. Not quantum physics, not suicide ships, information, the truth. Keiko made her decision. 3 hours later, using every broadcasting frequency available, she transmitted Saris's data to the entire galactic network. Every council world received it simultaneously. Every species under Council authority saw the evidence of 10,000 years of systematic oppression. The response was immediate and chaotic. On 14 worlds, protests erupted. 3 species formally declared independence from the Council. 7 more demanded the Supreme Arbiter's removal. The Council headquarters became a scene of unprecedented disorder, as representatives shouted accusations at each other. The Supreme Arbiter finally addressed the galaxy personally. His image appeared on every screen, his alien features composed but his voice carrying barely suppressed rage. These accusations are propaganda from a species facing extinction. They are lies designed to create chaos. The Council has maintained galactic peace for 10 millennia. We will not allow one rebellious species to destroy everything we have built. The Terminus fleet will proceed to Earth. This matter will be resolved permanently. But his words rang hollow now. Too many species had seen the evidence. Too many had their own suspicions confirmed. The Council's authority, absolute for so long, was crumbling. On Earth, preparations continued. If the Terminus fleet arrived, the cascade would activate. There was no longer any question. The only uncertainty was how much of the galaxy would burn with them. Sarah Okonkwo assembled every remaining pilot for one final briefing. These were the survivors. The ones who had made it through 3 days of desperate combat. They looked exhausted, traumatized, but still defiant. If the Terminus fleet arrives, we're launching everything we have left, Sarah told them. We probably won't survive long enough to see if the cascade works. But we'll make sure they remember us. We'll make sure every species in the galaxy knows that humanity died fighting, and that we took as many of them with us as we could. One pilot raised her hand. She was young, barely 20, with burn scars covering half her face. Ma'am, what if we win? Sarah paused. She hadn't really considered that possibility. Victory seemed like a fantasy, but the pilot's question deserved an answer. If we win, Sarah said slowly, then we rebuild. We help the other species who want to be free. We create something better than the Council, something based on choice instead of fear. The pilot nodded, satisfied. Around the room, others straightened. The possibility of victory, however unlikely, gave them something beyond revenge to fight for. In the command bunker, Marcus Webb made final adjustments to the Cascade device. Keiko found him there, staring at the machine that could doom the galaxy. Do you think we're doing the right thing? Marcus asked without looking up. I think we're doing the only thing, Keiko replied. We chose to stand. Now we have to see it through wherever it leads. Even if it leads to catastrophe, even then, because the alternative is teaching every species in the galaxy that resistance is futile, that you should always submit to power. I'd rather burn than send that message. Marcus finally looked at her. You know that makes you either the bravest person in history or the most reckless. The Terminus fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, like harbingers of apocalypse. 7 vessels, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They weren't ships. They were mobile stations of extinction, designed with a single purpose: to crack planets and ensure no trace of rebellious species survived. Fleet Admiral Keth commanded from the flagship. He was ancient, even by Council standards, having overseen the destruction of 4 species over his 3-century career. He viewed it as unfortunate but necessary work. Order required enforcement. Defiance required examples. Begin standard protocol, Keth ordered. Geological disruption weapons to full power. Target Earth's tectonic plates. Make it quick. But before the weapons could fire, something impossible happened. 3 Council warships broke formation and positioned themselves between the Terminus fleet and Earth. This is Commander Thrace of the Enforcement Fleet, came the transmission. Admiral Keth, I cannot allow you to proceed. New information has come to light regarding Council operations. Until the accusations against the Supreme Arbiter are investigated, I'm declaring a hold on all enforcement actions. Keth stared at his display in disbelief. Commander, you are committing mutiny. Stand down immediately or be destroyed. I'm committing to conscience, sir. Something I should have done long ago. Before Keth could respond, more transmissions flooded in. Ships from the Rethali, the Mechnor, and the Vasilians were entering the solar system. Not warships, but civilian vessels, thousands of them, placing themselves in a protective orbit around Earth. They came unarmed, offering only their presence. But the message was clear. If the Terminus fleet wanted to destroy humanity, they would have to kill these Council citizens first. Saris's voice cut across all channels. This is Representative Saris of the Rathali people. We stand with humanity, not because we endorse their methods, but because we recognize their right to choose their own fate. For too long, we have been complicit in the Council's crimes through our silence. That ends now. On Earth, Keiko Chen watched in astonishment as the space around their planet filled with ships from dozens of species. They were creating a living shield, volunteering to die if necessary to protect a species they had never met. They're actually doing it, Sarah Okonkwo whispered. They're standing up. Marcus Webb monitored the Cascade device. Admiral Keth still has enough firepower to destroy everything in the system. If he decides to fire, none of those civilian ships will make a difference. Admiral Keth faced an impossible situation. His mission was clear: destroy Earth. But to accomplish it, he would have to slaughter thousands of Council citizens, potentially millions. The political fallout would be catastrophic. And for what? To maintain the authority of a Council that was already fracturing? He opened a private channel to the Supreme Arbiter. Your Excellency, the situation has become untenable. Half the galaxy is watching. If I proceed, we may win this battle but lose the entire war. I'm requesting new orders. The Supreme Arbiter's response took several minutes. When it came, his voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of absolute power being challenged for the first time. You will complete your mission, Admiral. Order must be maintained regardless of cost. These species must learn that defiance has consequences. Fire on any ship that interferes, Council citizens or not. Keth felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of service. Doubt. He had always believed the Council's authority was legitimate, that enforcement actions, however brutal, served a greater good. But looking at thousands of civilian ships willing to die to protect one rebellious species, he wondered if he had been wrong all along. Before he could make his decision, another ship emerged from FTL. This one was different, ancient and ornate, carrying the symbols of the Council's highest authority. It was the Arbiter's personal flagship, rarely used except for ceremonial occasions. The Supreme Arbiter himself had come to oversee Earth's destruction. The Arbiter's image appeared on every screen in the solar system. He looked humanoid, though his skin was like polished stone and his eyes held the weight of millennia. Hear me, all species of the Council and those who foolishly defy it. I have governed this galaxy for 10,000 years. I have maintained peace when chaos threatened. I have made difficult decisions that lesser minds cannot comprehend. The accusations against me are the desperate lies of a species facing extinction. They must be ignored. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the civilian fleet. To those Council citizens who have placed themselves in harm's way, you are being manipulated. Return to your worlds immediately, or you will be classified as rebels and dealt with accordingly. Saris responded immediately. We are not manipulated, Arbiter. We are finally awake. The data humanity released is real. We have verified it independently. You have maintained power through fear and genocide. That is not peace. That is tyranny. Tyranny? The Arbiter's voice carried genuine confusion. I have protected you. All of you. I have prevented wars, maintained stability, guided lesser species toward civilization. Without my authority, the galaxy would descend into chaos. Without your authority, the galaxy would be free, Keiko Chen said, her voice cutting across the channel. And maybe that's what you really fear. Not chaos, freedom. The Arbiter turned his full attention to Keiko. You understand nothing. Your species is barely a century past nuclear warfare. You solve problems with violence. You lack the wisdom to govern yourselves, much less question how the galaxy should be ordered. You're right that we're violent, Keiko agreed. We fight when we should negotiate. We destroy when we should build. We have 1,000 flaws. But we also have something you've forgotten after 10,000 years of absolute power. We know what it means to struggle for freedom. We know that authority must be earned, not imposed. And we know that anyone who demands complete obedience is a tyrant no matter what they call themselves. Across the galaxy, billions watched this confrontation. The Arbiter, ancient and powerful, facing a human diplomat standing in the ruins of her civilization. It should have been no contest. But something had shifted in the galaxy's consciousness. Keiko's words resonated in ways the Arbiter's pronouncements no longer did. I offer you one final chance, the Arbiter said. Surrender now. Submit to Council authority. Your species will be integrated peacefully. The Cascade device will be dismantled. Those who influenced you toward rebellion will be punished, but most of humanity will survive. No, Keiko said simply. Then you doom not just yourselves, but everyone in this system. Admiral Keth, you have your orders, fire. For a long moment, nothing happened. Admiral Keth stared at his weapons display, his finger hovering over the activation command. One press and the Terminus fleet's weapons would tear through the civilian ships like paper, then crack Earth's crust open. Order would be maintained. The Arbiter's authority would be restored, but at what cost? No, Keth said quietly. What did you say? The Arbiter's voice carried shock. I said no, Excellency. I will not fire on unarmed civilians. I will not destroy an entire species because they dared to choose freedom over submission, and I will not follow orders from an authority I no longer believe is legitimate. You are relieved of command. All Terminus fleet vessels. This is the Supreme Arbiter. Fire on Earth immediately. This is a direct order. Silence answered him. Not one ship fired. The crews of the Terminus fleet, like Keth, had reached their breaking point. They had seen the evidence. They had watched thousands of civilians risk their lives. They had heard Keiko's words and remembered why they had joined the Council in the first place. To protect people, not to terrorize them. The Arbiter's composure finally cracked. This is rebellion. This is chaos. You doom the galaxy to war and suffering. No, Sarah said. We save it from your version of peace. On Earth, Marcus Webb kept his hand near the cascade activation switch, not quite believing what he was witnessing. Sarah Okonkwo watched her tactical displays as the Terminus fleet powered down its weapons. Keiko Chen felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the impossible hope that they might actually survive. The Arbiter made one last attempt to salvage his authority. His flagship's weapons powered up, targeting Earth directly. If his fleet wouldn't follow orders, he would do it himself. But Commander Thrace's ships moved to intercept, joined by the Rathali, the Mechnor, and the Vasilians. Dozens of warships surrounded the Arbiter's flagship, weapons locked but not firing. Stand down, Excellency, Thrace said. It's over. The Arbiter stared at the tactical display showing his complete isolation. 10,000 years of absolute authority, ended by one defiant species and the courage of those they inspired. He could fight, destroy a few ships, maybe even reach Earth before being destroyed himself. But it would change nothing. The galaxy had turned against him, his flagship powered down. The transmission channels fell silent. The crisis balanced on a knife's edge. Then Sarah spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. Former Supreme Arbiter, you are hereby placed under arrest for crimes against sentient species. You will stand trial before a new council, one that represents all species equally. The evidence will be examined. Justice will be served. Justice? The Arbiter laughed bitterly. You have no idea what you're unleashing.